There is a computer being built right now that will be able to break every password on the planet, every encrypted bank transaction, every government secret, every private message you have ever sent, every security system protecting every piece of digital infrastructure in the world. All of it becomes vulnerable the moment this machine reaches its full potential. And the company building it is not some secretive military contractor. It is not a shadowy foreign government. It is IBM, the same company that made the laptop your parents used in the 90s. And in 2026, they just announced they are spending $10 billion to finish the job. This is not science fiction. This is not a theory. This is happening right now, and the implications for every single person who uses a phone, a bank account, or the internet are so enormous that the fact this is not the biggest story in technology right now is genuinely baffling to me. But before we get to what this means for you, I need to explain what quantum computing actually is. Because the way it gets explained in most places is either so dumbed down it loses all meaning, or so technical that normal people check out within 30 seconds. I am going to do neither of those things. I am going to explain it in a way that makes you feel the weight of what is actually happening. Because once you understand it, you will not be able to look at your phone the same way again. Your laptop, your phone, every computer that has ever existed, works with bits. A bit is either 0 or 1, off or on. Every calculation your computer does, every image it displays, every message it sends, is ultimately a series of zeros and ones, being manipulated at incredible speed. The power of a classical computer comes from how fast it can flip those zeros and ones, and how many it can handle at once. This system has worked brilliantly for 70 years, and it has transformed human civilization. But it has a fundamental limitation. Some problems are so complex, with so many possible combinations of zeros and ones to check, that even the fastest classical supercomputer would take longer than the age of the universe to find the answer. These problems are not unsolvable in theory. They are just unsolvable in any practical amount of time using the rules that all existing computers follow. Quantum computing throws those rules away entirely. A quantum bit, called a qubit, does not have to be 0 or 1. It can be both at the same time. This is called superposition, and it is a real physical property of matter at the subatomic level, not a metaphor, not an abstraction. When a qubit is in superposition, it is genuinely, physically, measurably, in both states simultaneously until you observe it. And when you connect multiple qubits together in a phenomenon called entanglement, something remarkable happens. The combinations they can represent do not add, they multiply. 2 qubits can represent 4 states simultaneously. 10 qubits can represent over 1,000 states simultaneously. 300 qubits can represent more states simultaneously than there are atoms in the observable universe. What this means practically is that certain types of calculations that would take a classical computer millions of years can potentially be solved by a sufficiently powerful quantum computer in minutes. And IBM just announced it is closer to building that computer than it has ever been before. Here's what actually happened in 2026. And I want to walk you through this carefully because the announcements IBM made this year represent a genuine inflection point, not just incremental progress. In November 2025, IBM unveiled a processor called Nighthawk, 120 qubits, connected by 218 next-generation tunable couplers, arranged in what IBM calls a square lattice. The previous IBM processor, called Heron, connected qubits to their immediate neighbors in a hexagonal pattern. Nighthawk connects each qubit to 4 neighbors instead of the previous designs, fewer connections, giving it over 20% more connectivity. This does not sound dramatic until you understand what it enables. More connectivity between qubits means circuits can run more complex calculations without accumulating errors as quickly. IBM says Nighthawk can handle circuits 30% more complex than Heron while maintaining the same low error rates. And in quantum computing, circuit complexity is everything. The number of 2-qubit gate operations a processor can reliably complete before errors overwhelm the calculation is the single most important measure of how useful it actually is for real problems. Nighthawk can handle 5,000 2-qubit gates today. IBM has committed to pushing that to 7,500 by the end of 2026. By 2028, they plan to connect multiple Nighthawk modules together to reach 15,000 gates across over 1,000 connected qubits. To put that in perspective, the calculations needed to simulate complex molecules for drug discovery, to optimize global supply chains, to crack current encryption standards, become accessible somewhere in that range. But Nighthawk is just the near-term machine. The announcement that signals where IBM is really going is a processor called Loon. Loon is not available to the public. It is an experimental chip that exists purely to test the architectural components needed for what IBM calls fault-tolerant quantum computing. And this distinction between quantum computers that exist today and fault-tolerant quantum computers is the most important technical concept in this entire story. Every qubit is fragile. Any interaction with the outside environment, a tiny vibration, a stray electromagnetic field, even thermal noise from the air around it, can cause a qubit to lose its quantum state in a process called This means quantum calculations accumulate errors. The more qubits you connect, and the longer your calculation runs, the more errors you get. Current quantum computers, including IBM's best ones, use sophisticated mathematical techniques to estimate and correct for these errors after the fact. But this approach has limits. At some point, the errors overwhelm the error correction, and your result becomes unreliable. The solution is hardware-level error correction, where the quantum computer actively detects and fixes errors in real time as the calculation is running. This is what fault-tolerant quantum computing means, and it is extraordinarily difficult to build. IBM's approach uses something called QLDPC codes, which stands for Quantum Low-Density Parity Check codes. Without going deep into the mathematics, these codes allow a quantum computer to create what are called logical qubits, where the quantum information is distributed across many physical qubits in a way that errors on individual physical qubits can be detected and corrected without destroying the quantum state. The number of physical qubits needed to create one reliable logical qubit is a critical engineering challenge. Earlier approaches required thousands of physical qubits per logical qubit, which made scaling essentially impossible. IBM's new QLDPC code requires only 288 physical qubits for 2 logical qubits, which is a dramatic reduction that makes large-scale fault-tolerant systems actually buildable within this decade. The Loon processor is the first chip IBM has built with the 6-way qubit connectivity needed to implement these codes in hardware, and in a result that IBM says came a full year ahead of schedule. They demonstrated real-time decoding of QLDPC error correction in under 480 nanoseconds, 10 times faster than previous leading approaches. Now I want to talk about the money, because the financial scale of what IBM announced in June 2026 signals something important about where they believe this technology is going. On June 2nd, IBM announced plans to invest more than $10 billion in quantum computing over the next 5 years. This is the largest single-company quantum computing investment ever publicly disclosed. It spans research and development, manufacturing, mergers and acquisitions, and ecosystem expansion. But the most strategically interesting part of the announcement is something that happened 11 days earlier. On May 21st, IBM and the United States Department of Commerce signed a letter of intent to establish a company called Anduril, the world's first standalone pure-play quantum wafer foundry. The U.S. government is contributing $1 billion through CHIPS Act incentives. IBM is contributing another $1 billion in cash, plus intellectual property and workforce. Anduril will be headquartered in Albany, New York, and will operate as a 300mm quantum wafer fabrication facility, manufacturing quantum processor chips not just for IBM but potentially for multiple quantum hardware companies. Why does this matter beyond the money? Because a dedicated quantum chip foundry means quantum computing is transitioning from laboratory science to industrial manufacturing. The same transition happened in classical computing when dedicated semiconductor foundries like TSMC emerged, and it unlocked the scaling that gave us everything from the iPhone to modern AI. IBM is betting that Anduril will do for quantum chips what dedicated foundries did for classical chips. It is an infrastructure bet, not just a technology bet. And when the United States government co-invests at that scale, it signals that quantum computing has crossed the threshold from interesting research project to national strategic priority. The practical question you might be asking right now is what any of this means for real problems in the real world. IBM and its partners have been building evidence on this front throughout 2026. At IBM's Think 2026 conference in Boston, researchers announced that Cleveland Clinic and the Japanese Research Institute, RIKEN, had used IBM quantum hardware to simulate a protein complex containing 12,635 atoms. Classical computers struggle enormously with protein simulation because the quantum mechanical interactions between electrons in a large molecule involve a number of possible states that grows exponentially with the size of the molecule. IBM's quantum-centric supercomputing approach, which combines quantum processors with classical high-performance computing hardware like RIKEN's Fugaku supercomputer, allowed the team to achieve results 210 times more accurate than previous state-of-the-art quantum approaches on a problem of this size. This is not quantum computers replacing classical computers. It is quantum processors acting as specialized accelerators for the specific calculations that classical computers handle inefficiently. And drug discovery is one of the most valuable places where this matters, because simulating how drug molecules interact with proteins at the quantum mechanical level is exactly the kind of calculation that could shorten the development timeline for new medicines from decades to years. QCTRL, a quantum software company working with IBM's platform, reported completing a commercially relevant materials simulation more than 3,000 times faster than the leading classical approach. Materials simulation matters for batteries, semiconductors, catalysts for industrial chemistry, and solar cells, among many other things. The ability to accurately model materials at the quantum level without the approximations classical methods require could fundamentally change how we design the physical world. Now I want to come back to the thing I opened this video with, because I do not want to leave it hanging. The relationship between quantum computing and encryption, the internet security that protects your banking, your email, your private communications, is based on mathematical problems that classical computers cannot solve in any reasonable amount of time. The most widely used form is called RSA encryption, and its security relies on the fact that multiplying two large prime numbers together is trivially easy, but factoring a large number back into its prime components is computationally prohibitive for any classical computer at the key sizes used today. A sufficiently powerful fault-tolerant quantum computer running an algorithm called Shor's algorithm can factor these large numbers efficiently, which means it can break RSA encryption. This is not a theoretical concern. It is a mathematically proven capability that will become a practical reality at some point as quantum hardware scales. IBM itself acknowledges this in its 2026 roadmap documentation, noting that cryptographically relevant quantum computers may not arrive for some years, but that organizations need to begin transitioning to quantum-safe cryptographic protocols now, because completing an inventory of cryptography in an organization, performing risk assessments, migrating vulnerable systems, and implementing quantum-safe alternatives takes several years. Governments have heard this message. The United States National Institute of Standards and Technology finalized its first post-quantum cryptographic standards in 2024 precisely because of this concern. The quantum threat to encryption is one of the reasons the U.S. government is co-investing in IBM's quantum foundry. Whoever leads in quantum computing has a potential strategic advantage in intelligence, defense, and economic security that has not existed in any previous technological era. IBM's 2029 target is a processor called Starling. This is the system IBM believes will qualify as the world's first large-scale fault-tolerant quantum computer. It is planned to run 100 million gates on 200 logical qubits. For context, modern RSA encryption uses key sizes that would require a fault-tolerant quantum computer running Shor's algorithm at a scale somewhat larger than Starling to break efficiently. But Starling represents the first system capable of running the sustained, error-corrected computations that fault tolerance enables, and its arrival will represent a before and after moment in the history of computing. The IBM Quantum Developer Conference for 2026 is scheduled for November 11th through 13th in Chicago, where IBM has indicated it will share the latest results from its Quantum Advantage Tracker, present hardware and software updates, and give the quantum developer community direct access to its newest capabilities. Based on everything IBM has announced this year, that conference is likely to include either the first formal verified quantum advantage claim or the clearest roadmap to it that has yet been presented publicly. What I want you to take from this video is a sense of genuine scale. We talk about technology changing the world constantly, and most of the time that phrase is dramatically overstated for things that are genuinely incremental improvements on what already existed. Quantum computing at fault-tolerant scale is not incremental. It is a different category of machine entirely. The calculations it enables are not faster versions of what classical computers already do. They are calculations that classical computers cannot do at all. Drug discovery, materials science, cryptography, optimization of systems, too complex for classical approaches, financial modeling, climate simulation. All of these fields have problems sitting unsolved right now, not because humanity lacks the intelligence to solve them, but because the machines required to run the calculations do not yet exist. IBM is building those machines, and in 2026, with $10 billion committed, America's first quantum chip foundry under construction, a processor demonstrating real-time error correction a year ahead of schedule, and the first verified quantum advantage claims expected by the end of the year. The timeline for those machines to exist has never been clearer or more credible. The question is not whether this technology will change the world. The question is whether you understand what is coming before it arrives. If this video made quantum computing click for you in a way it never has before, tell me in the comments what surprised you most. Was it the encryption implications, the protein simulation breakthrough, or the sheer scale of money involved? Because your answer tells me exactly what to go deeper on next. And if you want to understand how IBM's quantum computers actually compare to what Google, Microsoft, and China are building right now, and who is actually winning this race, that is the next video. Subscribe so you are there when it drops.